After securing the side mirror back onto the old Toyota sedan, Keela gave it one last check. It held firmly. She packed the last tool into her bag and stood up. "Can I ask what you're doing to my car?" Keela spun around. A man about her parents' age stood a few feet away in a dark suit, watching her with a calm expression. "I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to do anything to your car. I saw the mirror hanging loose, so I fixed it. I know I should have asked first. If I damaged anything," the man smiled. "I'm kidding. I've been watching you from across the street." He walked over and tested the mirror himself. "You did a good job. Where did you learn to fix cars?" "My father taught me. He used to own a garage back home." The man opened his wallet and held out $200 bills. "Take it. You saved me a trip to the garage." Keela glanced at the money. $200 was more than she made in half a day, but she pushed the bills back toward him. "No, thank you. I wasn't working for you. I just saw something I knew how to fix." She picked up her bag. "If the mirror works, that's enough. Have a good day." Before the man could say anything else, Keela hurried toward the street. She was already thinking about how much time she had left before her morning shift. Adam watched her disappear down the block, then looked at the repaired mirror. He had spent his entire life around people who wanted something from him. Yet the young woman who had just repaired his car, and who clearly had little money to spare, had refused $200 without hesitation. Adam got into the car, but Keela stayed on his mind long after he drove away. Every morning at 6, Keela's alarm went off beside her bed. She got up, washed, made something simple for breakfast, and packed what she needed for the day. After 6 years of almost the same schedule, most of it no longer required much thought. Keela usually left earlier than necessary. Walking to the grocery store saved money, but it also gave her time to slow down along the way. She often stopped at shop windows before they opened, looking at clothes, furniture, or apartments she could not afford. She rarely wanted anything extravagant, just things she hoped she could buy one day without first checking what else the money was needed for. That morning, the loose mirror on Adam's Toyota had interrupted her routine. By the time Keela left the parking lot, she was walking faster than usual, with the $200 she had refused still on her mind. She worked 3 jobs and had just turned down more than half a day's pay. "Maybe that was stupid," she muttered. Then she remembered what Jonathan and Nicole had taught her. If you could help someone without losing anything yourself, help them. And if you wanted to be paid, earn it with your own ability. Adam had never asked her to fix the mirror. She had done it because she knew how. A dress in a shop window caught her attention. Keela slowed down and checked the price. Too much. She smiled anyway. One day. Then she checked the time and continued toward work. There had been a time when Keela's family did not have much money, but they had enough. She grew up in a small community on the outskirts of Greenville, South Carolina, where her father owned a modest 2-bay garage. Jonathan handled routine maintenance and repairs for people who did not want to drive into the city or pay dealership prices. Some months were better than others, but the mortgage was paid, food stayed in the kitchen, and Jonathan could usually put something aside after expenses. Keela spent much of her childhood there. When she was younger, she did homework in the office while the sounds of tools and engines came through the open door. Later, she began following Jonathan around the shop. He started her with simple jobs, but Keela kept asking questions, so the work became more difficult. He taught her how to change oil, replace worn parts, and find the source of a problem instead of replacing the first thing that seemed broken. When she made mistakes, he made her find them. When she rushed, he made her start again. "A customer pays twice when a mechanic guesses," he told her. The first serious problems did not begin with the garage. They began with Thomas. At first, there was no single event large enough to frighten the family. He stayed out later. He stopped spending time with the friends Jonathan and Nicole knew and began bringing home people they did not. He missed school, then lied about where he had been. When Nicole found out, Thomas apologized and behaved for a while. Jonathan tried to keep him busy at the garage. He thought regular work might give his son some direction. Thomas would arrive on time for several days, sweep the floor, move parts, and help with simple jobs. Then he would stop showing up. When Jonathan asked where he had been, Thomas always had a reason. A friend needed help. Someone had promised him a better job. The garage did not pay enough. He was going to find something bigger. None of those plans lasted. What did last was his need for money. At first, Thomas asked Nicole for small amounts. Then he began borrowing from friends. When they wanted to be repaid, he came home with another explanation. Jonathan covered the first debt because he believed Thomas had made a mistake. Nicole covered another because her son promised he had found work and would repay her. For a while, Thomas became very good at giving his parents exactly enough hope to make them help him one more time. The money disappeared faster after he started gambling. He did not admit it immediately. The family learned piece by piece. A call from someone asking when Thomas would repay a loan. Money missing from a drawer. A lie about a job that did not exist. Then Thomas came home after several days away and admitted he owed more than he could pay. Jonathan was furious. He made Thomas work at the garage and took most of what he earned toward the debt. For several weeks, Thomas arrived every morning. Nicole began to believe the problem had finally frightened him enough to change. Then one day, he did not come to work. By evening, he had disappeared again. So had some cash Jonathan kept in the office. The next time Thomas returned, he cried, apologized, and promised his parents he was done with gambling. Jonathan wanted him out of the house. Nicole asked him to give their son one more chance. Keela watched the same pattern repeat with larger amounts each time. Thomas created the problem. Her parents argued about what to do. Then one of them paid enough to make the immediate danger disappear. Thomas learned something from every rescue, not how to stop, how far he could go before his family stepped in. By the time Keela was 17, Thomas had borrowed more money to gamble than the family could rescue him from. This time, the people he owed were no longer willing to wait. Jonathan refused to pay. There was little left anyway. Earlier debts had drained the family savings. The garage had bills of its own, and Nicole's medical expenses were increasing. Thomas searched through drawers and cabinets for anything he could sell. Jonathan caught him trying to take equipment from the garage and ordered him out. Thomas left, but the problem did not leave with him. Men began asking for him. One came to the house. Others appeared near the garage. Customers saw strangers waiting outside and heard arguments about money. Some stopped bringing their cars back. Jonathan closed early whenever Nicole was alone at home. Keela began checking the road before walking from school to the garage. Thomas returned after several days. This time, he did not promise to change. "If you don't help me, they'll keep coming here." Jonathan stepped toward him. "You brought them here. I know. Your mother is afraid in her own house because of you." Thomas had no answer. Jonathan pointed toward the door. "Get out." Nicole stood between them. Thomas turned to her. "Mom, please. I can't fix this by myself." In the days that followed, Nicole begged Jonathan to find a way to end the problem. Jonathan argued that paying would only teach Thomas to return with a larger debt. Nicole knew he was right, but she was afraid of what would happen if they did nothing. By then, the family had no savings left. Jonathan tried borrowing against what he still owned. The numbers did not work. Eventually, the only thing with enough value was the garage. Keela heard her parents discussing it late at night. She came out of her room and stood in the doorway. "Don't sell it," neither of them answered. "Dad, if you pay this, he'll do it again." Jonathan rubbed both hands over his face. "I know." "Then let him deal with it." Nicole turned toward her daughter. "And if those people come back here? We call the police. And if Thomas disappears? If they find him first?" Keela had no answer that would make her mother stop being afraid. Jonathan sold the garage he had spent years building. After the remaining business obligations were settled and Thomas's debt was paid, there was no second chance hidden in the money. The family had lost its main source of income. Jonathan had lost the work he knew. Thomas stayed long enough to learn that the debt was gone. He promised to find a job and help the family recover. Then he disappeared. Weeks passed without a call. Jonathan tried reaching him until Thomas stopped answering. Nicole continued checking her phone. Keela stopped asking whether he had called. The garage was gone. Thomas was gone. The people left behind were the ones who had to live with what it had cost. The next year changed Jonathan and Nicole faster than Keela expected. Jonathan looked for work at other garages, but he was no longer a young mechanic who could spend 10 hours a day lifting, bending, and working beneath cars. Years of physical work had already taken a toll on him, and losing his own garage affected him more than he admitted. Some places offered occasional work. None gave him the steady income he had once brought home. Nicole's diabetes became harder to manage. With less money coming in, every medical expense required another calculation. The family still owned their small house and kept a few chickens, but those things could not replace a business. Keela finished high school in the middle of it. Her classmates talked about colleges, applications, and what they planned to study. Keela had once expected to be having the same conversations. Instead, she began searching for full-time work. She checked what jobs were available near home and compared the pay with what her parents needed. Even if she found one, the numbers were not enough. Greenville offered more work and better pay, but moving there meant rent, food, and living alone at 18. Keela spent weeks going back and forth over the decision. Staying home felt safer. Leaving gave her a chance to earn enough to help. One evening, she told her parents at the kitchen table, "I'm going to Greenville." Nicole stopped eating. "For what?" "Work. There's work here." Not enough, Jonathan understood before Nicole did. "What about college?" Keela had prepared her answer. "I'll still go, just not this year." Nicole shook her head. "You've talked about college since you were a child, and I'm still going." "Then go now." Keela glanced around the kitchen. The refrigerator was old. One cabinet door no longer closed properly. A stack of medical bills sat near the wall. "With what money?" Nicole fell silent. Keela continued before either parent could stop her. "I'll work for a year, maybe 2. I'll save enough to start school, and I can send some money home until Dad finds something steady." Jonathan leaned back in his chair. "You're 18. You shouldn't be paying our bills. Someone has to." The words came out harder than Keela intended. No one spoke for several seconds. Thomas's name was not mentioned. It did not need to be. Jonathan lowered his eyes. "How much are you planning to send us?" "Whatever I can." "That isn't a plan for college." "I'll make both work." Jonathan knew his daughter well enough to hear what she was really saying. She would pay her own expenses first, send money home second, and try to build a future with whatever remained. "Keela." She reached across the table and put her hand over his. "Dad, I'm not giving up. I just need more time." A few weeks later, Keela packed her clothes into 2 bags. Nicole added food until Keela told her there was no room left. Jonathan checked the bags twice and gave her the small set of tools she had used with him at the garage. "You won't need all of these," he said. "I know." Keela took them anyway. At 18, she left the house where she had grown up and headed for Greenville. She believed she was postponing college long enough to help her family recover. 1 year, maybe 2. She carried that plan with her into the city. Keela arrived in Greenville with 2 bags, Jonathan's old tools, and enough money to survive until her first paycheck. She found a room in an aging apartment building where the rent was low because almost everything else was old. The hallway lights failed often. The walls were thin. The kitchen was barely large enough for one person to turn around without bumping into something. Keela took it. She did not need a good place to live. She needed the cheapest place that still allowed her to get to work without spending too much on transportation. Within days, she found a morning job at a grocery store. The pay was not much, but Keela believed she had already completed the hardest part. She had moved. She had work. Now she only needed discipline. Her plan was to cover her own expenses, send some money home, and save the rest. If she worked hard for a year, perhaps 2, she could begin college without asking Jonathan and Nicole for money they did not have. Keela wrote down her expected income and expenses in a notebook. Rent, food, transportation, money for home, college. The numbers were tight, but on paper, they worked. Real life began changing them almost immediately. The first month, Keela discovered how many small things living alone required. Laundry, toiletries, work shoes, a bus ride when the weather made walking impossible. None of them were large expenses, but they kept appearing. Keela responded by learning to spend as little as possible. She walked whenever she had enough time. She cooked simple meals in her room. When a cabinet hinge came loose, she fixed it instead of reporting it and waiting for the landlord. When the sink began leaking, she found the worn seal and replaced it herself. An old fan stopped working during the summer, and Keela spent an evening taking it apart on the floor until it ran again. Jonathan's tools had followed her to the city for a reason she had never expected. Each repair saved only a small amount, but Keela kept track of small amounts. At the end of her first month, she sent money home. It was less than she wanted. She promised herself the next month would be better. The next month was not better. Nicole needed medication. Jonathan had found occasional work, but some weeks there was none. A repair at the house could no longer be postponed. Keela sent more money home and told herself she would replace it when the next paycheck arrived. She did not. Her grocery store wages covered rent, food, and the amount her parents needed, but there was almost nothing left for college. Keela began asking for extra shifts. When another employee called out, she volunteered. When the store needed someone on a weekend, she took the hours. For a while, that helped. Then the extra shifts became less frequent, while the expenses did not. Keela looked for a better-paying job. Most of the positions she found required experience, training, or a degree she did not have. Others paid only slightly more and offered fewer hours. After several weeks of searching, she stopped trying to replace the grocery store and began looking for work she could do after her morning shift. A cafe hired her for the afternoon. The first weeks were exhausting. Keela finished at the grocery store, ate something on the way, then worked until evening cleaning tables, carrying supplies, and helping wherever she was needed. But when she received her first full paycheck from both jobs, the difference was large enough to make the exhaustion seem temporary. She could pay rent without worrying. She could send money home. For the first time since moving to Greenville, something remained. Keela told herself this was how the plan would finally begin. She only needed to keep the two jobs long enough to build savings. Then Jonathan went through a period when he could barely find work. Nicole had another medical expense. Keela sent home more. Months passed, and the amount she had hoped to save kept being used before it could grow. She did not resent her parents. Every time Nicole apologized for needing help, Keela told her to stop. "I'm working. I can handle it." What Keela did not tell them was that college had already moved from next year to the year after that. One night, she sat on her bed with her notebook and went through the numbers again. There was only one expense she could not reduce enough to change the result. She did not earn enough. A restaurant several blocks away was hiring evening servers. Keela closed the notebook and applied the next day. The restaurant became Keela's third job. Her mornings belonged to the grocery store. Her afternoons belonged to the cafe. Her evenings belonged to tables, orders, and customers who often stayed long after she wanted to go home. Keela learned to build her life around the spaces between shifts. She knew which route saved time, when a bus was worth paying for, and which cheap meals could be eaten while walking. She kept an extra shirt in her bag and took any profitable shift she could fit into the week. The first few months were the hardest. Some nights, Keela returned to her room, sat down to remove her shoes, and woke hours later with the light still on. Eventually, the schedule became familiar. The money improved. That was enough to keep her doing it. Keela could send something home every month instead of waiting for an emergency. Nicole worried about how much her daughter was working. Keela always gave her the same answer. "It's temporary." She still believed that. The 3 jobs were supposed to accelerate the plan, not replace it. But life kept finding uses for the extra income. Rent increased. Food became more expensive. Jonathan's health limited the work he could take. Some months Keela saved more. Other months, the money disappeared into something necessary. Employers changed over the years. The structure of her days did not. Morning shift, afternoon shift, evening shift. At 19, Keela still told her parents she would start college soon. At 20, she said she needed a little more money first. At 22, Nicole stopped asking when she planned to enroll. Keela noticed. She did not bring it up. By then, the schedule that had once been temporary had become the life she knew how to live. Keela eventually opened a separate savings account and named it College Fund. Money left in her regular account was too easy to use. There was always a bill, something needed at home, or a week when one of her jobs gave her fewer hours than expected. Once money went into the college fund, Keela treated it as if it no longer belonged to her present life. The first deposits were small, $50 after a normal week, $100 when her restaurant tips were good, more when she picked up extra shifts. Some months, she added almost nothing, but $1,000 became 2, then 3. The years passed around the number. At 23, Keela began looking at college programs again. She checked tuition, schedules, and whether she could keep working while studying. The numbers were still difficult, but no longer impossible. She started telling herself that 24 might finally be the year. By then, the college fund had passed $8,000. It had taken 6 years to build. Keela was not wealthy. She was simply closer than she had ever been to the life she had planned before leaving home. At 24, Keela still lived in the same old apartment building. Higher rent would have taken money from the college fund every month, so she stayed. Every morning at 6, she began the same routine again. That was the life behind the few minutes Adam had seen in the parking lot. The old tool bag belonged to a girl who had grown up in her father's garage. The hands that repaired his mirror had spent 6 years scanning groceries, clearing cafe tables, and carrying restaurant plates. After leaving Adam, Keela reached the grocery store with only a few minutes to spare. Her morning passed behind the register. Then came the cafe. By evening, she was serving tables at the restaurant. The encounter had changed nothing about her day. Before bed, Keela opened the banking app on her phone. The college fund was still above $8,000. She thought about the $200 she had refused. I really might be stupid, she smiled, closed the app, and set the phone beside her bed. Within a few days, the man with the Toyota became a small story she occasionally remembered when she walked past the parking lot. She did not know his last name or what he did for a living. She had no reason to believe their paths would cross again. After Keela walked away, Adam tested the mirror again. It moved properly and held in place. Whatever she had done it well. He got into the Toyota and drove home. The old sedan was not the kind of car people expected a man like him to drive. Adam owned newer cars, and most days a driver took him wherever he needed to go. But he had kept the Toyota for years and sometimes drove it when he returned to parts of Greenville he had known before anyone there recognized his name. That morning, Adam had eaten breakfast across the street from Keela's apartment building. He noticed her near his car and initially thought she was trying to take something. Then he saw the tools. By the time he approached, he already knew she was repairing the mirror. His question had been a joke. Her refusal of the money had not been. At home, Adam changed for work. His driver arrived at the same time as always, and Adam opened the first report before the car had gone far. Reports in the car, meetings at the office, calls between meetings, more documents on the way home. His mornings had followed some version of that routine for years. That day, Adam read the same paragraph twice. On the third attempt, he reached the end and realized he still had not absorbed it. He lowered the report. Is something wrong, sir? His driver asked. No, Adam opened the report again. The image returned before he finished the page. Keela pushing $200 back toward him. Adam understood people who wanted money. He also understood people who pretended not to want it while waiting to be offered more. Keela had done neither. She had refused, picked up her tools, and hurried away because she was late for work. Adam closed the report and left it on the seat beside him. Adam had not grown up with the kind of money he now carried in his wallet. By 15, he had lost both parents. What little family support remained kept him from sleeping on the street, but not much more. He took whatever work he could find. He cleaned floors, washed dishes, carried boxes, served food, and washed cars by hand. If one job ended, he found another. If someone offered more hours, he took them. Adam was not following a dream. He was trying to pay for the next week. For years, every dollar already had a purpose before he earned it. Rent, food, shoes that had worn through, a debt from the month before. When he remembered Keela refusing $200, Adam could not imagine his younger self doing the same. At her age, he would have taken the money and asked whether there was another mirror to fix. Construction was the first work that changed his direction. The pay was better, but Adam noticed something more important. Money moved around the labor he was doing. A worker carried the materials, a driver delivered them, a supplier sold them, a contractor bought them. One delay could cost everyone money. Adam was still being paid for his back and his time, but he began watching the people who were paid for knowing what to buy, where to find it, and when it needed to arrive. Adam started asking questions. He learned which suppliers were reliable, which ones were cheaper, and who could find materials quickly when a project was already behind schedule. Most people answered him freely. Adam was only a laborer. No one saw him as competition. Then one contractor complained that a supplier could not deliver a material for another week. Adam knew a smaller supplier across town that had it available. He made the introduction and solved the problem. Later, another contractor needed a large order at a better price. Adam knew who to call. At first, he asked for nothing. Then he realized the information itself had value. His first deals were small. He connected buyers with suppliers, helped arrange orders, and kept a margin. He continued working construction because the deals were not reliable enough to live on. After work, he made calls. On days off, he visited suppliers. He learned how volume affected prices, how transportation changed the final cost, and how much contractors would pay to avoid losing days waiting for materials. he also made mistakes. Once, Adam promised a delivery before confirming the date and spent most of his profit fixing the problem. Another time, he failed to account for transportation and earned almost nothing. He remembered both. Slowly, Adam stopped depending entirely on what he could carry. He left full-time labor when the deals began paying more than his wages and opened a small building materials business. It did not grow overnight. Larger companies had more money, better equipment, and established customers. Adam survived by doing what he had learned on construction sites, noticing where people were losing time or money and finding a way to solve it. Small orders became contracts. The materials business connected him with contractors, developers, and eventually projects large enough to lead him into construction itself. Years later, his companies operated on a scale that barely resembled those first deals. But Adam never stopped looking for small problems around a business. A customer waiting too long, a supplier charging too much, a service people needed but could not find nearby. He had built much of his life by noticing what other people walked past. Adam married after his business had begun to succeed. By then, he had spent so many years worrying about the next payment, order, and opportunity that he did not know how to stop simply because he could finally afford to. Success only made the decisions larger. More employees depended on him. More money was at risk. There was always a reason to stay at work longer. Adam made sure his wife and children never lived the way he had. They had a large house, good schools, travel, and the freedom to pursue whatever they wanted. Adam considered that one of his greatest achievements. When his children became adults and wanted to build businesses in New York, he helped them. He provided capital, introduced them to the right people, and made sure they could survive their early mistakes. His children were grateful. They called. They visited. There was no argument that broke the family apart. They simply built lives that no longer required them to live near him. His wife had a life of her own, too. She traveled and spent time with friends, while Adam continued working. When they were both home, everything functioned perfectly. Meals were prepared, schedules were organized, the house was comfortable. But the four people who had once lived there together had gradually learned to spend most of their time somewhere else. Adam responded by working more. It was what he had always done when something was missing. As a boy, work had bought food. Later, it had built a business. When his children left, it filled the hours they had once occupied. Adam rarely called himself lonely. His days were full of people waiting for meetings, calls, and decisions. Most nights, he returned home late enough that the quiet did not last long before he went to bed. The car stopped outside Adam's office. His driver opened the door, but Adam remained seated long enough for the man to glance back. "Sir?" Adam picked up the report he had barely read and stepped out. His assistant met him before the elevator and began reviewing the morning schedule. A supplier meeting, a construction update, a call about one of his children's businesses in New York. By the time Adam reached his office, work had pushed Keela aside. Usually, that was enough. This time, the memory returned. Not often enough to interrupt his life, but at unexpected moments. Once, while approving a contract worth more than Keela might earn in years, Adam remembered how long she had looked at the $200 before refusing it. Another morning, he passed the Toyota in his garage and tested the mirror without needing to. Adam knew almost nothing about her. Her father had taught her to repair cars. Her family once had a garage. She lived in an old apartment building and had been in such a hurry to reach work that $200 could not make her stay. That was all. Adam had spent decades meeting people who wanted to impress him, sell him something, gain access to him, or turn one favor into another. Keela had not even asked his name. One morning, Adam caught himself thinking about her again. "Interesting young woman," he said. Then he opened the next report. 3 months passed before Adam saw Keela again. By then, the encounter outside her apartment had been buried beneath contracts, meetings, and the problems that filled his days. One evening, Adam finished work later than planned and asked his driver to stop at a restaurant he had visited for years. When they arrived, the lights were off. A sign on the door said the restaurant was temporarily closed for repairs. His driver mentioned another place several blocks away. Adam agreed. The restaurant was busier than he preferred. Nearly every table was occupied, and servers moved quickly between the dining room and kitchen. Adam was shown to a table near the window. He ordered a drink, opened a document on his phone, and began reviewing it. A few minutes later, a familiar voice made him look up. Keela was placing 2 plates on a table across the room. Adam recognized her before he understood why. Her hair was pulled back, and the tool bag had been replaced by an order pad. Then she turned, and he was certain. The young woman who had repaired his car at sunrise was serving dinner 3 months later. Keela did not notice Adam. She was already moving toward another table. Adam returned to the document on his phone, but the restaurant was busy enough that he soon found himself watching the room instead. Keela delivered drinks, carried plates, then stopped when an older woman had trouble reading the menu in the dim light. A voice called from the kitchen. Keela answered, but stayed long enough to help the woman choose before moving on. Later, another server fell behind, and Keela carried one of her orders without being asked. When a table had been waiting too long, she stopped to tell them their food was coming instead of avoiding them. None of it was extraordinary. Adam had spent his life around people who worked hard. What he noticed was that Keela seemed to know where each minute mattered. His own table was not in her section. Another server took his order while Adam ate, answered calls, and continued working. Keela crossed the dining room several times without recognizing him. Near the end of his meal, she approached carrying a plate another server had asked her to deliver. "Here you are, sir." She placed it in front of him, reached for an empty glass, then saw his face. "You," Adam smiled. "Me." Keela looked at him for another second. "The mirror. I was hoping you remembered something besides my car. You never told me your name." "Adam." "Keela. I know. Your coworkers have been calling it across the restaurant. Someone called her again." Keela glanced toward the kitchen. "Apparently, everyone knows my name tonight." She picked up the empty glass. "Enjoy your meal, Adam." Then she was gone again. By the time Adam finished dinner, Keela was still moving between tables. He paid the bill and left $300 in cash on the table. The meal did not justify the tip. Adam knew that. But this time, the money had nothing to do with a mirror she had repaired without being asked. He had spent more than an hour watching her work. He left before Keela returned. Outside, his driver was waiting when someone called behind him. "Adam!" Keela came out of the restaurant, still wearing her uniform and holding several bills. She stopped in front of him and held out $200. "You left too much. I know how much I left." "Then take this back." Adam did not reach for it. "Why?" "Because your dinner wasn't that expensive." The tip wasn't for the dinner. Keela's expression changed. "If this is about the mirror again." "It isn't." Adam glanced through the restaurant window. "I watched you work? You watched me work? That sounds worse than I intended." Keela almost smiled. "A little, you're good at your job. I carry food to tables. You do more than that." Keela looked at the money. $300 is still too much. "Last time, you refused because I never asked you to fix my car. Tonight, you were working. I ate here. What's the problem now?" The restaurant door opened behind her. "Keela, we need you!" "Coming." She separated $100 and held the other 2 toward Adam. "I'll keep this." Adam accepted them. "Why 100? "Because I can believe I earned 100. And the other 2? I'd spend the whole night wondering why a stranger gave them to me." Adam put the money back into his wallet. "You're difficult to tip. You're difficult to give money back to." The door opened again. Keela stepped backward. "Thank you. For the 100? For paying me for something I actually did." Then she returned to work. Adam remained beside the car. Through the restaurant window, he saw Keela put the $100 bill away, pick up a tray, and return to work. His driver opened the rear door. Adam was about to get in when something from their first meeting returned to him. Keela had been in a hurry that morning too. "Give me a minute." He returned to the entrance. A coworker told Keela he was still outside, and she came to the door. "Did you change your mind about the 100? "No. I wanted to ask you something. Quickly. I'm working." "Is this where you were going that morning?" "What morning?" "When you fixed my mirror." "No. I was going to work." Adam glanced behind her at the restaurant. "You're working now. This is my night job." "What do you do during the day?" Keela shifted toward the door. "I work. I gathered that." She saw he was waiting for an answer. "Grocery store in the morning, cafe in the afternoon, here at night." Adam stared at her. "Every day?" "Most days." "Why?" Keela almost laughed. "Because they pay me. 3 jobs? 3 paychecks. Someone passed behind her carrying a tray, and Keela moved aside. Adam looked at the crowded restaurant. And you still stopped to repair a stranger's car before the first one. The mirror was hanging by a wire. It bothered me. So you fixed it for free. And tonight I worked for the $100. Keela reached for the door. That's the difference, Adam smiled. I'm beginning to understand. Good. Then I can go back to work. Go. Keela opened the door, then looked back. Adam? Yes? Next time, tip like a normal person. She went inside before he could answer. Adam got into the car. As they pulled away, he looked back at the restaurant. 3 jobs, morning, afternoon, and night. He knew what that schedule cost. What he did not know was what Keela was working toward. 2 days later, her phone rang while she was between shifts. The name on the screen stopped her. Thomas. Keela stared at Thomas's name until the phone nearly stopped ringing. It had been more than 2 years since she last saw him. He had called a few times after leaving home, usually when he needed something. Keela had learned not to answer. This time, she did. Hello? Keela? Thomas sounded almost surprised. You still have the same number. What do you want? Nothing. I wanted to see how you were. Keela stepped away from the cafe entrance. She had less than 20 minutes before her afternoon shift. You haven't called me in almost a year. I know. And now you just want to know how I am? Thomas gave a short laugh. You still don't trust me. Should I? He paused. Probably not. The answer caught Keela off guard. Thomas usually defended himself or blamed someone else. This time, he admitted he had given her reasons not to trust him. He said he had been living nearby for several months and had found steady work handling shipments for a furniture export company. Then he asked if she had time to meet for coffee. Keela almost refused. I have 30 minutes tomorrow between jobs. 30 minutes is fine. Send me the address. A few minutes after the call, Thomas sent it. He also sent a photograph of himself standing with several men outside a company building. Everyone wore work clothes. Thomas was smiling. Keela studied the picture. Maybe he had finally found something stable. She put the phone away and went back to work. The next day, Keela found Thomas sitting near the back of the cafe. His left arm was wrapped and supported in a sling. He looked thinner than she remembered. What happened? Sit down first. Thomas. I broke my arm. Keela took the chair across from him. Thomas said a heavy shipment had shifted while he was helping move it. He fell, injured his arm, and had been replaced while he recovered. If he stayed away too long, he said, the company might not take him back. Why didn't you go to the hospital? I did. Then they told me what it would cost. What about insurance? Not enough? Workers' compensation? Thomas shook his head. The company says I wasn't supposed to be helping with that load. I say my supervisor told me to. You know how long that argument could take? He showed her the company website and photographs from a warehouse. In one, Thomas stood beside several workers and stacks of furniture. Keela did not know he had edited himself into the images. She saw only evidence that matched his story. I was doing fine, Thomas said. Then this happened. Keela looked at the sling. Let me take you to a hospital. I found a smaller clinic outside the city. It costs less. Then I'll go with you. When? Keela stopped. She was scheduled at all 3 jobs for the next several days. Thomas saw the hesitation. Exactly. You don't have half a day to drive me around. I can make time. I'm not asking you to take care of me. Keela looked at him. Then what are you asking? Thomas lowered his eyes. I'm short on the treatment. There it was. For several minutes, Thomas had almost allowed Keela to believe he only wanted to see her. How much? About $4,000. $4,000? That's the estimate. Show it to me. Thomas looked away. I don't have it with me. You have the company website and pictures of your coworkers, but not the bill you need $4,000 for? I haven't gone to the clinic yet. Then I'll pay the clinic directly. Keela. That's the only way. Thomas admitted the $4,000 was not only for treatment. He needed transportation and money to live on until he could work again. Keela stared at him. Forget it, Thomas said. I knew you'd think I was lying. He reached for his phone. Can you blame me? No. Again, the answer was not what Keela expected. Thomas looked down at the table. I know what I did to Mom and Dad. I know what happened to the garage. Then why haven't you been home? Because I don't know how to look Dad in the face. Thomas stood. I shouldn't have asked. Sit down, he did. Keela checked the time. She was already late. I'm not giving you $4,000 today. Thomas's face fell. I didn't say no. Give me 2 or 3 days to think. I don't have much time. Then find someone else. Thomas stopped. Send me the name of the clinic. I'll check it. He nodded. Keela left for work. Before she reached the next block, a message arrived. Thank you for meeting me. Even if you say no, I'm glad I got to see you. Thomas did not call. He sent messages instead. He apologized for asking for so much. He said the pain was getting worse and that former coworkers had been unable to lend him enough. Then he wrote that the company could not keep his position open indefinitely. Keela read the messages and did not answer. She knew Thomas. She remembered the garage, the strangers outside her parents' house, and the promises that had come before every disappearance. But this time, he had prepared for her doubts. The company existed. The photographs existed. She had seen the injured arm herself. More than that, Thomas had not shouted or blamed her. He had admitted she had reasons not to trust him. On the second night, Keela opened her college fund, a little over $8,000. $4,000 would take almost half of what she had saved in 6 years. She closed the app. The next day, Thomas said he had found someone willing to lend him part of the money. If Keela could help with $2,000, he would find the rest himself. $2,000 still hurt, but it would not empty the account. Keela thought about what refusing might cost if Thomas was telling the truth. An untreated injury could take away the first steady job he had held in years. That evening, she opened the banking app and entered $2,000. Before confirming it, she looked again at the photograph of Thomas with his supposed coworkers. Then she changed the amount. $3,000. Keela stared at the number before pressing the button. Thomas called less than a minute later. Keela, it's $3,000. That's all I can give you. That's more than enough. I'll borrow the rest. Use it for your arm. I will. And when you start working again, pay me back. Every dollar. I promise. Keela had heard Thomas promise things before. Have you been home to see Mom and Dad? The line went silent. Thomas? I have to go. I'll call you later. The call ended. Keela sent one more message. Go see them. Thomas did not answer. 2 nights later, Keela was carrying drinks through the restaurant when a group of 4 entered. She barely noticed them until she heard one of the men speak. Keela turned. Thomas was sliding into a booth. There was no sling, no bandage. He wore a clean dress shirt, dark pants, and a watch she had never seen before. One arm rested behind the woman beside him while he opened the menu with the other, his left arm. Thomas had not seen her. Keela delivered the drinks she was carrying and returned toward the kitchen. On the way, she looked again. Thomas was using the hand he had supposedly broken to pour wine. You, okay? Another server asked. Yeah. Keela reached for the next order. I'm fine. She avoided Thomas's table for another 20 minutes. Then a coworker approached. Can you take table 12? I need 5 minutes. Keela looked toward Thomas's booth. Can someone else do it? Everyone's buried. Keela picked up the order pad. Fine. Thomas was telling a story when she reached the table. Can I get anyone another drink? His voice stopped. Thomas looked up. Keela looked directly at his left arm. Your arm healed fast. No one spoke. Keela, what can I get you? The woman beside him frowned. You two know each other? I'm his sister. Thomas never said he had a sister. Keela kept her eyes on him. Thomas says a lot of things. His face tightened. Can we talk outside? I'm working. Keela, please. Do you need anything else? Thomas looked around the table. No. Then enjoy your dinner. Keela turned away. Thomas followed her into the hallway. Let me explain, she turned. Take off the bandage. Thomas said nothing. The one you were wearing 3 days ago. It wasn't what you think. You told me your arm was broken. I was in trouble. So you made fake pictures? Thomas glanced toward the dining room. Keep your voice down. You took $3,000 from me. I'm going to pay it back. With what? Your furniture export job? His face changed. Keela had her answer. There is no job. Keela, listen to me. How much are you spending tonight? This isn't my money. How much? Thomas did not answer. Keela looked toward the booth. I work for hours to make $100 in tips. Thomas reached for her arm. Keela stepped back. Don't. I didn't know what else to do. You could have told me the truth. You wouldn't have given me the money. Exactly. Thomas lowered his voice. I owed someone. Gambling? He looked away. Keela turned toward the dining room. Go back to your friends. I'm sorry. She looked at him once more. No, you're caught. Keela finished her shift. Thomas left without trying to speak to her again. After his table was cleared, she asked how much the group had spent. $387. Keela returned to her room after midnight and opened her banking app. A little over $5,000 remained in the college fund. 3 days earlier, there had been more than 8. 6 years of saving had taught her exactly how long $3,000 took to earn. $50 after 1 week, $100 after another. Extra shifts when she could fit them in. Thomas had taken it in minutes because she had wanted one part of his story to be true. She opened her messages. Thomas had sent 7. I'm sorry. Let me explain. I'll pay you back. Please answer. Keela read them, then looked at the last message she had sent him. Go see Mom and Dad. He had never answered. Again, she said. He did it again. Keela put the phone aside and lay down. The light remained on. Keela stopped answering Thomas. He called from his own number, then from numbers she did not recognize. The $3,000 was never repaid. What Keela did not know was that Thomas had already borrowed from nearly everyone still willing to listen. Gambling losses had become loans. Loans had become larger debts. Friends stopped answering. Eventually, Thomas borrowed from people who cared less about his excuses and more about being paid. When he could not repay them, they gave him another way to reduce what he owed. Thomas began collecting money from other debtors. At first, he accompanied other men. Later, he went without supervision. He knew what fear could make a family do. He had watched his own parents sell a garage because of it. Now he was helping use the same fear against other people. One afternoon, Thomas and 2 men went to collect from someone who had missed several payments. No one answered the door. Believing the man was hiding inside, they forced their way in and began breaking things. Neighbors heard the threats and called the police. Thomas tried to leave through the back and was arrested before reaching the street. This time, there was no debt Jonathan could pay, and no story Thomas could tell Keela to make the problem disappear. Weeks later, Nicole called. She was crying. Thomas had been arrested, and for the first time since Keela left home, the trouble he created was not the worst thing waiting for her there. Nicole called while Keela was walking from the grocery store to the cafe. When Keela finally found the phone in her bag, all she heard at first was her mother breathing. What happened? It's Thomas, Nicole told her about the arrest, breaking into a house, property damage, threats, working with people who collected illegal debts. When she finished, Keela asked, Is anyone hurt? I don't think so. Did those people come to the house? No. Are you and Dad safe? Yes. Keela leaned against the wall of a closed store, then let him stay there. Nicole went silent. Keela, don't borrow money. Don't sell anything. Don't promise anyone anything. I don't have money to rescue anyone. Something in Nicole's voice changed the conversation. What does that mean? Nothing. Things have been a little difficult. Keela straightened. When was the last time you saw your doctor? Nicole did not answer. Mom? I missed 1 appointment. 1? Maybe 2. Why? I can still see. It's just blurry sometimes. Keela stopped walking. Since when? A while. The arrest that had begun the call no longer mattered. Put Dad on. Jonathan's answers were no better. Nicole's vision had been getting worse, but they had delayed appointments because money was tight. We didn't want you sending more money, he said. You work 3 jobs already. Keela looked toward the cafe several blocks away. I'm coming home this weekend. You don't have to. I'll be there Saturday. By the time she continued toward work, Keela had stopped thinking about Thomas. It had been 2.5 years since Keela last went home. Every trip required time away from work, transportation costs, and rearranging 3 schedules. She had kept telling herself she would visit when life became less busy. It never did. Jonathan was waiting outside when she arrived. He moved more slowly than she remembered, and carrying one of her bags inside left him tired. Nicole hugged her in the kitchen. When they separated, Keela noticed her mother was not looking directly at her face. How much can you see? Enough. Keela moved to one side. Nicole's eyes followed late. Diabetes had already affected her vision. Without consistent treatment, it had become worse. Some days, anything beyond a short distance blurred. Several prescriptions were running low. One had already run out. Why didn't you tell me? Because every time we tell you something, money appears. That's the point. No. The point was for you to build your own life. Keela looked around the house. Nothing had been replaced unless it stopped working completely. She had spent 6 years sending money home without understanding how little her parents kept for themselves. Jonathan was bringing in a little from occasional repair work. It was not enough. "Why aren't you working full-time at a garage?" Keela asked. He avoided her eyes. "My back doesn't cooperate for full days anymore." Over the next 2 days, Keela took Nicole to be examined and went through the bills her parents had hidden from her. The situation was worse than they had admitted. Nicole needed regular care. Jonathan could no longer provide the income they had once depended on. On Sunday afternoon, Keela opened the college fund. A little over $5,000 remained after Thomas's lie. Then she began transferring money out. Keela returned to the city after arranging Nicole's next appointments and paying for medication. She began calling home more often. For several weeks, the new routine seemed to work. Then Jonathan called during her morning shift. "Your mother burned her hand." Nicole had been cooking on a day when her vision was especially poor. She misjudged the position of a pot and spilled hot liquid across part of her hand and wrist. Jonathan had taken her for treatment. "I'm coming." "Keela, wait." She had already started walking toward her supervisor. Nicole's hand was bandaged when Keela arrived. The injury would heal, but Keela could no longer pretend the problem could be managed from a distance. Her mother could not safely cook alone when her vision was poor. Jonathan could help, but his own health had declined. Treatment, medication, and follow-up care took more than $2,000. The college fund that had once held over $8,000 was reduced to a little more than $3,000. Keela did not spend long looking at the number. Money could pay for treatment. It could not put someone beside Nicole when her vision failed in the kitchen. On her last evening at the house, Keela sat down at dinner. "I want you to sell the house." Jonathan and Nicole looked at her. "And come live with me." Jonathan was the first to respond. "And where exactly are we supposed to live?" "With me." Nicole looked at Keela. "In that room you rent? I'll find somewhere else. You already work 3 jobs. How are you going to pay for a bigger place? The house is worth something." Jonathan's expression changed. "This house is all we have left." "And what is it doing for you?" Keela asked. "Dad can't work enough to support both of you. Mom can't be here alone when her vision gets bad. The house needs repairs you keep putting off. So we sell it and spend the money on rent?" "No. Part goes into a separate account for your medical care. The rest stays untouched until we can use it toward another house." Nicole looked at her. "And your college money?" Keela did not answer. "How much is left?" "A little over $3,000. Keep it." "Mom, you have spent 6 years saying you would go, and I will. When?" Keela had no answer. Jonathan looked at her. "Your mother is right. You've already given us enough." Keela stood. "You think I'm going back and leaving both of you here after what just happened?" "We managed before you came," Jonathan said. Mom burned her hand because she couldn't see the pot. Jonathan fell silent. "And you can't keep pretending you can do everything for her when your own health is getting worse." "I'm still her husband." Keela's voice softened. "I know. That's why I'm not asking you to do it alone." The room became quiet. Selling the house meant leaving the last place the family still owned. But keeping it would not restore the life they had once lived there. "If you stay, I'll keep sending money. I'll keep worrying every time you don't answer. And the next time something happens, I'll leave work and come back again." "None of us can keep doing this." Nicole looked at Jonathan. "Maybe she's right." He remained silent for a long time. "I spent most of my life paying for this house." Keela sat down again. "Then let it do something for you now, finally." Jonathan nodded. The house took time to sell. Keela returned to the city and searched for somewhere the 3 of them could afford. She eventually found a modest 2-bedroom apartment in an older residential area. It was not new, but it was clean, quiet, and close enough to stores for her parents to manage without a car. The kitchen had enough room for Nicole to move around safely. The rent was considerably higher than what Keela had been paying. Standing in the empty living room, she calculated the difference. There would be less money left every month, but she could manage it. She signed the lease. When the family house finally sold, the amount was modest. After the remaining costs were settled, Jonathan and Nicole gave control of the money to Keela. "Dad, this is yours." "It's ours," Jonathan said. "And you're the only one I trust to keep Thomas from touching it." Keela placed part of the money into a separate fund for her parents' medical care. Most of the rest went into another account. She named it Home Fund. Then she opened the college fund, A little over $3,000 remained. Keela had built it $50 and $100 at a time. At 18, she had believed it would take 1 or 2 years to reach a classroom. At 24, she transferred the entire balance into the home fund and closed the old account. She did not tell herself she was giving up college. She simply stopped putting a date on it. Soon afterward, Jonathan and Nicole arrived with clothes, photographs, kitchen items, and several boxes Jonathan insisted were still useful. Keela had found a secondhand table and bought 2 beds for the apartment. The first week, she came home after midnight and found both parents still sitting at the table. "Why are you still awake?" Nicole pointed toward the food. "You haven't eaten." "You don't have to wait for me." "We know." The next night, they waited again. For the first time since she was 18, Keela was no longer carrying her family from a distance. Several weeks after Jonathan and Nicole moved in, Keela had a rare morning off. Nicole sent her and Jonathan to a grocery store a few blocks away. In the parking lot, they passed a man arguing on the phone beside a car with its hood open. $1,000 just to come out here and fix it? He listened, then ended the call. Jonathan slowed down. "Dad," Keela said, "keep walking. I am walking." He was already moving toward the car. "Car trouble?" The man explained that a mobile repair service had quoted as much as $1,000 without seeing the vehicle. Jonathan looked under the hood. "Mind if I take a look? Are you a mechanic?" "Used to own a garage." The man stepped aside. Jonathan began asking what had happened before the engine stopped. Then he had Keela start the car while he listened. He checked several things and sent her to a nearby store for a cheap tool. Nearly an hour later, he straightened. "I can't promise there isn't anything else wrong until it's properly checked. But this problem shouldn't cost $1,000. "How much?" "Parts and labor? $300 at most." "Can you fix it?" Jonathan glanced at Keela. She knew that look. "If we get the part." They bought what they needed nearby. Jonathan's back forced him to change positions several times, so Keela handled most of the physical work while he guided her. When they finished, the engine started normally. The man still paid them $300. On the walk home, Jonathan counted the money. Not bad for a trip to buy groceries. "Mom's going to ask why lunch took 2 hours. Tell her we got delayed." Keela looked at the money in his hand. "How much do mechanics make now?" Jonathan glanced at her. More than grocery cashiers that evening. After Nicole went to bed, Keela began searching for garages near the apartment. Keela found a small garage a few blocks from the apartment. The next morning, she stopped there before her grocery shift. The owner looked at her application. "You've worked in a grocery store, cafes, and restaurants." "Yes." "And now you want to repair cars." "Yes." "Where did you train?" "My father owned a garage. I grew up working with him." "Any certification?" "No." "Professional experience?" "At his garage." "How long ago?" 6 years. The owner placed the application on the desk. "That's a long time." "Then test me." He looked at her. "Test you?" "Give me something to diagnose. If I don't know what I'm doing, I'll leave." A mechanic entered the office and said a customer was waiting for an estimate. The owner looked toward the service bay. "Come with me." The car had been brought in because of a persistent noise and vibration the customer believed was coming from the engine. Another shop had already suggested an expensive repair. The owner gave Keela no other information. "You wanted a test." 6 years had passed since she worked regularly beside Jonathan. Keela began with the basics. She asked when the problem occurred and whether anything had changed recently. Then she inspected the car. She ruled out one possibility and moved to another. She took longer than an experienced mechanic would have, but she did not guess. When she finally called the owner over, she showed him what she had found. The problem was not where the customer thought it was, and it did not require the expensive repair the other shop had suggested. The owner checked it himself. "Who taught you to diagnose like that?" "My father. I can give you mornings." Keela stared at him. "You're hiring me? I'm giving you a chance. Don't make me regret it. What time do I start?" 7. Keela checked the time and hurried toward her grocery shift. Before she reached the store, she called Jonathan. "Dad, what happened? I need you to help me remember everything you taught me." Keela quit the grocery store first. It was the lowest paying of her 3 jobs, and the garage needed her during the same hours. She kept the cafe in the afternoon and the restaurant at night. For the first few weeks, her schedule became harder, not easier. The garage demanded a different kind of attention. A mistake could cost someone hundreds of dollars or send a car back onto the road with a problem still unresolved. Keela arrived early. When she did not know something, she asked. At home, she described unfamiliar problems to Jonathan over dinner. Sometimes he gave her an answer. Other times, he asked questions until she found it herself. What did you check first? The obvious things. That tells me nothing. Dad. A customer pays twice when a mechanic guesses. Keela looked at him. Jonathan smiled. You remember, at the garage, some customers saw a young woman approaching their car and asked for one of the men instead. Keela did not argue. She moved to the next job. Then customers began returning and asking for the person who had repaired their car before. One afternoon, a warning light returned on a car Keela had worked on. She checked it again and found what she had missed. You're going to be late for your other job, the owner said. Then I'll be late. Keela stayed and corrected the repair. Several days later, the customer returned with another family member's car. By the end of the second month, the owner was assigning Keela more difficult work. Tips became more frequent as customers learned her name. One evening, Keela added up what she had earned from the garage, the cafe, and the restaurant. Then she calculated what full days at the garage could pay. She checked the numbers twice. With more hours and the tips customers had begun giving her, one job could pay more than all 3 of her old jobs combined. The next morning, Keela asked the owner if he still needed a full-time mechanic. He did. Keela gave notice at the cafe and restaurant. For the first time in 6 years, she had one job. Over the next 6 months, Keela became one of the garage's most dependable mechanics. She was not the most experienced person there, and unfamiliar problems still forced her to ask for help. But she learned quickly because she had no interest in pretending she knew something she did not. Jonathan remained part of the process. On good days, he visited the garage for an hour or 2. He no longer had the strength for full days of physical work, but his experience was still useful. Sometimes Keela called him over to listen to an engine. Other times, he noticed something a younger mechanic had missed. Eventually, the owner began paying Jonathan for the hours he helped. Jonathan resisted at first. Then he accepted. The amount was not large. He began preparing for those mornings the night before. Customers also began returning for Keela. Some asked for her because she had repaired their car before. Others came because someone had recommended her. Keela learned that technical skill was only part of what brought people back. Customers wanted to understand what they were paying for. She began showing them worn parts when possible and explaining what needed to be repaired now and what could wait. If everything is urgent, Jonathan had taught her, the customer stops believing you. The owner noticed that customers approved more repairs when they trusted the explanation. He began giving Keela more responsibility with estimates and customer questions. Without planning it, she was beginning to learn the business skills she had once hoped to study in college. 6 months after Keela started at the garage, an old Toyota sedan pulled into the lot. Keela was beneath the hood of another car and did not see the driver get out. The garage owner did. Your customer, he called. Keela looked up. Adam stood near the office. You! Keela wiped her hands on a cloth. The mirror. Adam looked around the garage. You really do remember me by my car. It keeps bringing you back. The owner explained that Adam had used the shop for occasional maintenance for years. The Toyota needed an oil change, and the air conditioning had not been cooling properly. Keela looked over the work order. About 3 hours. 3 hours? If you want me to check the air conditioning properly, Adam glanced at his watch. I have nowhere urgent to be. You can come back. I'll wait. Adam sat in the small waiting area with a newspaper while Keela returned to work. After a while, she passed him. You do this a lot. Do what? Watch me work. The first time, you were touching my car without permission. I fixed your car. The second time, I was eating dinner. And now? Now I'm making sure you don't break my air conditioning. Keela shook her head and went back to the Toyota. Near mid-morning, Adam wanted coffee. The garage had none, and the nearest cafe was several blocks away. He decided to wait. By late morning, Keela had found the air conditioning problem and was finishing the repair when Nicole arrived carrying food. Since Jonathan had begun spending occasional hours at the garage, she sometimes brought lunch for both of them. That day, she had prepared more than they could finish. Jonathan opened the containers. You brought enough for the whole shop. Then the whole shop can eat. Keela looked toward Adam. Have you eaten? Not yet. My mother brought too much food. Nicole looked at her. I did not bring too much. She always brings too much. Adam stood. I don't want to take your lunch. You were willing to give me $300 for carrying plates, Keela said. You can eat some rice. Adam laughed and joined them. The meal was simple, prepared at home because buying lunch every day cost too much. Adam took the first bite and stopped. Nicole noticed. Is something wrong? No, he took another bite. It tastes like something my mother used to make. Adam rarely spoke about his parents. He asked Nicole what she had used. She explained the dish while Jonathan complained that she never made it the same way twice. Nicole told him he had eaten it for years without complaining. Keela listened to them argue. Adam smiled and continued eating. Short time later, the Toyota was ready. Keela explained the problem, showed Adam what had been replaced, and gave him the bill. Before leaving, Adam looked once more at the garage. A mechanic customers trusted. An older man whose technical knowledge was still useful. No coffee anywhere nearby, and a simple home-cooked meal that had reminded him of his mother. He said nothing. Adam got into the Toyota and drove away. Adam thought about the garage again that evening. Not Keela alone. The entire experience. He had spent 3 hours waiting for a routine service and an air conditioning repair. When he wanted coffee, there was none nearby. By lunchtime, Nicole had arrived with food. Other customers had spent the same hours dropping off cars, finding rides, or sitting in a small waiting area with nothing to do. Adam had spent decades noticing inconvenience. Inconvenience often meant someone would pay for a better option. The next morning, he asked an employee to study the neighborhood where he had first met Keela. He wanted the number of households and vehicles nearby, the distance to repair shops and car washes, commercial rents, and the local demand for coffee, breakfast, and affordable food. What exactly am I researching? The employee asked. Adam thought about the garage. Cars, coffee, and lunch. Over the next 4 days, the numbers began to support the idea. The neighborhood was dense with working families and car owners, but lacked a convenient place for common repairs, washing, and food in one location. Adam began drawing the pieces together: repair and maintenance, car washing, coffee and simple breakfast in the morning, affordable lunches later in the day. Customers could come for one service or combine several. He added family packages priced for the neighborhood rather than luxury customers. Then the financial projections arrived. Adam read them twice. The business could make money. The problem was how much. Compared with opportunities already available to him, the expected return was small. One of his senior employees looked at the numbers. It works. I can see that. But we have better places to put the money. Adam closed the report. I can see that too. Should I stop the research? Adam looked at the projections once more. Yes. That afternoon, Adam returned to his office after another meeting. The garage reports had been moved to one side of his desk. He worked for another hour before noticing them again. Adam took the folder to a private terrace and lit a cigarette. He had rejected good businesses before. Money placed in one project could not be placed somewhere else, and the garage concept was simply less profitable than his other options. Then Adam reached beneath his shirt and took out a small round locket he had carried for years. Inside was a faded photograph of himself at about 10 years old, standing beside his parents. Adam looked at it. The lunch at the garage returned to him. Jonathan complaining about Nicole's cooking while continuing to eat. Nicole answering him. Keela sitting between them. Nothing about the meal had been expensive or prepared for Adam. He had simply been invited to sit down. Adam thought about his own family. His children had built lives in New York. His wife had a life of her own. They loved one another. But the house he had worked so hard to provide was often empty. Adam looked at the photograph again and smiled. The garage concept would never become his most profitable business. It did not need to. He returned to his office and called the employee who had collected the research. Don't stop. The garage project? Yes. Did something change in the numbers? No. Then why are we continuing? Adam closed the locket. Because I want to. The employee remained silent. Don't worry. It still has to make money. Adam opened the report again. Now I need to know whether the people I have in mind can actually run it. Adam returned to the garage 2 days later without the Toyota. What broke this time? Keela asked. Nothing. Then why are you here? I want to talk to you. I'm working. After your shift, Adam returned near closing time. Instead of offering Keela another job, he began asking about the garage. How many cars came through each day? Why did customers return? How were complaints handled? Keela answered what she knew and refused to pretend she knew the rest. Why are you asking me this? I'm considering opening a business. What kind? Repair, maintenance, car washing, coffee, breakfast, lunch. Keela stared at him. All in one place? That's the idea. You came here once, ate my mother's food, and now you want to open a garage with a restaurant? I spent several days studying the area, the competition, the costs, and the demand. And it can make money. A lot? Adam smiled. Not compared with my other businesses. Then why this one? Because I want to build it. Keela folded her arms. What does that have to do with me? I want you to run it. Keela laughed. Adam waited until she realized he was serious. I'm a mechanic. I know. I've been doing this for 6 months. I know that too. I've never managed a business. That is the part I don't know, Adam pointed toward the garage. So before I give you a new business, you prove you can handle this one. He had already spoken with the owner. For a limited period, Keela would take responsibility for daily operations, scheduling, workflow, customer problems, costs, and employees. Adam would cover losses caused by the test and take responsibility for legitimate customer claims. And if I fail? Keela asked. I lose some money. You go back to repairing cars. And if I don't? Then we talk about the new business. Keela looked through the open service bay. I don't know how to manage a garage. Then learn. Adam began walking toward his car. Wait, you're paying if I lose money? Correct. You barely know me. That is why it's a test. Adam opened the car door. Try not to make me pay too much for the customers you upset. He smiled and drove away. The next morning, Keela would enter the same garage where she had spent 6 months learning to repair cars. This time, everyone inside would be waiting for her decisions. On Keela's first morning in charge, she arrived before everyone else. She reviewed the schedule and made a list of everything that needed to be done. By 9 o'clock, the list was useless. A customer arrived early. Another came without an appointment and insisted his problem was urgent. A part ordered the previous day was wrong. The phone kept ringing while customers waited at the counter. Keela responded the only way she knew how. She worked harder. She answered calls, inspected cars, spoke to customers, checked parts, and still tried to complete repairs herself. By lunchtime, everyone was waiting for her. A mechanic needed approval for additional work. A customer had received no update. Another car occupied a service bay because Keela had not decided whether to order a part. Near closing time, one mechanic looked at her. Do you want us to help? Or do you want us to watch you do all of it? I'm helping. No. You're in the way. The words irritated Keela because they were true. The next day, she tried assigning work earlier and stopped taking every repair herself. Things improved until she spent 40 minutes arguing over one complaint and later paid too much for a rush order she had created by failing to check parts availability. By the end of the first week, the garage had not collapsed. That was the best she could say about it. Adam called Friday evening. How much money did I lose? I don't know yet. That is not a good answer. Then stop calling before I finish the numbers. Adam laughed. You've been doing it for 5 days. Call me when you've done it longer. He ended the call. After that, one of Adam's employees began appearing every few days. Sometimes he asked questions. Other times, he sat in the waiting area with a laptop. You're reporting everything to Adam, aren't you? Keela asked. He pays me. What did you tell him? That you ask too many questions. The reports were not entirely good. Keela still checked too much herself and kept people waiting for decisions. But the same mistake rarely happened twice. She also began using the people around her. Jonathan helped when technical decisions became difficult. Nicole helped in a way Keela did not expect. One afternoon, she found an angry customer waiting while Keela was still in the service bay. Nicole sat beside the woman and listened until Keela arrived. What did you say to her? Keela asked later. Nothing important. She was shouting before. I listened. That's all? You should try it, Keela did. She began noticing that some customers needed a technical explanation. Others first needed someone to acknowledge that their day had been disrupted. Complaints became shorter. At home, Jonathan talked about repairs. Keela talked about schedules and costs. Nicole asked why customers had nowhere comfortable to sit. It's a garage, Keela said. There's still people. Keela wrote that down. Several weeks into the test, Adam asked Keela to meet him at his office. She arrived carrying reports she had prepared herself. Adam looked through the first page. What am I looking at? Revenue, labor costs, parts, refunds. And what does it tell you? Keela began explaining which weeks had been busiest. Adam stopped her. Busy is not the same as profitable, he pointed to one week. You had more cars and made less money. Keela looked at the numbers. We had several low-cost jobs. You also paid too much for parts. Customers were waiting. Why? Keela checked the report. 2 cars had been accepted before anyone confirmed parts availability. I created the rush. Yes, Adam pointed to another line. You gave this customer a discount. We made him wait longer than promised. What happened afterward? Keela checked her notes. The customer had returned 2 weeks later with another vehicle. Adam closed the report. Numbers don't make decisions for you. They tell you what your decisions did. For the next hour, he made Keela explain the garage back to him. Which services produced reliable margins? Which repairs occupied service bays too long? How many customers returned? Where did complaints begin? Keela could answer some questions. Others she had never considered. Adam showed her how to look at the garage as a system rather than a collection of repairs. A mechanic waiting for a decision cost money. A wrong part cost money twice. A returning customer could be worth more than the profit from one repair. Before she left, Adam gave the reports back. Next time, tell me what the numbers mean before I ask. Is that all? No. Stop staying until midnight. Keela looked at him. How do you know that? I have someone reporting to me, remember? Your spy. My employee, Adam smiled. If the garage only works when you are there, you are not managing it. That sentence followed Keela back to the garage. Keela changed the way she worked. One mechanic verified parts before jobs were promised. Another tracked vehicles waiting for customer approval. Keela still repaired cars when needed, but she stopped using repairs as an escape whenever management became uncomfortable. She checked the numbers every week. When one type of job repeatedly occupied a service bay too long, she adjusted the schedule. When a supplier caused the same problem twice, she found another option. The garage did not suddenly double its revenue. Employees still made mistakes. Customers still complained. But fewer problems depended on Keela being the first person to notice them. At the end of the test, Adam returned. Keela was waiting with the final numbers. He sat down. How much did I lose? She slid the report across the desk. Adam reached the final line. 0. The garage had not produced meaningful extra profit during the test. It had not lost money either. Adam looked up. You seem happy about making nothing. You told me not to make you pay too much. I remember. You paid nothing. The number itself was not what convinced Adam. He had watched Keela begin the test trying to do everything herself. She ended it with a garage that could continue working when she stepped away. Jonathan's technical knowledge had proved useful. Nicole had noticed customer problems others ignored, and Keela had learned from every mistake that cost something. Adam closed the folder. All right, what? We build it. Keela stared at him. The new business? Yes. You're sure? No. That's reassuring, Adam stood. If I were sure, someone else would have built it already. Keela remained seated. What happens now? Adam looked back. Now you find out whether running an existing garage was the easy part. Adam had already chosen the area before telling Keela they were moving forward. The new business would open near the old neighborhood where he had once lived and where he first met her. The decision was practical. The area was dense with working families who depended on cars, but there was no full-service garage close enough to become the obvious choice. Commercial rent was also lower than in wealthier parts of Greenville, allowing them to keep prices within reach of the people who lived there. Adam showed Keela several properties. The first was too small. The second would require too much construction. The third was an old industrial building with enough room for repair bays, washing areas, parking, and a separate section near the front for food and coffee. Keela walked through it with Jonathan and Nicole. Jonathan studied the service area. Nicole looked for the kitchen. The kitchen needs more room, she said. The repair bays need more room, Jonathan answered. People are coming here for their cars. And what are they doing while they wait? Waiting. Nicole looked at him. That is why no one asks you to design restaurants. We have an entire building, Keela said. Stop fighting over the same 10 feet, Adam smiled. Get used to this. To what? everyone believing their part of the business is the most important. The building needed work, but the rent and location fit the plan. They signed the lease. Adam funded the renovation, equipment, and initial operating costs, but Keela did not receive an unlimited budget. A better lift meant less money for something else. A larger kitchen increased renovation costs. More tables reduced the waiting area. Every decision took money or space from another part of the business. For the next several months, Keela moved between contractors, suppliers, equipment lists, and permits while finishing her responsibilities at the old garage. Adam reviewed major expenses but refused to make every decision for her. Once, Keela showed him 2 equipment options. Which one should I choose? Which one do you need? That's what I'm asking you. Then you're asking the wrong person. Keela hated that answer. Eventually, she stopped asking Adam what he would choose. She began telling him what she intended to choose and why. Sometimes he changed her mind. Other times, he approved the decision and moved on. By the time the building was ready, Keela had spent months making decisions for a business that had not earned its first dollar. The business opened quietly. There were no lines of cars outside and no crowd in the cafe. The first customer came for an oil change and bought coffee while he waited. The second came for a car wash and bought nothing else. A woman stopped for breakfast and asked whether she needed to have a car service to eat there. By the end of the first week, Keela understood that putting several services in one building did not mean customers would automatically use them together. Repair customers often did not know food was available until they were leaving. Cafe customers were unsure whether the entrance belonged to a restaurant or a garage. The staff knew their individual jobs but struggled when several parts of the business became busy at once. On the third day, a line formed at the service counter while food orders were sent to customers who had moved to another waiting area. A car wash customer blocked the wrong lane and delayed a vehicle leaving a repair bay. Keela spent the day solving problems created by procedures she had helped design. The first month ended with a loss. Adam had expected it. Keela had known it was possible. Seeing the numbers still hurt. We need more customers. Adam looked at the report. You also need to stop losing the ones you already have. We're not losing them. How many came back? Keela checked. She did not have an answer. She began following up with customers. The problems were smaller than she expected. Some had not known about the packages. Others thought the cafe was only for people waiting on cars. One woman said she would return for breakfast if parking near the front were easier. A father liked the idea of bringing his children while his car was serviced, but said there was nothing for them to do. None of those problems had appeared in the research. They only appeared after real people used the business. Keela began making changes. She moved signs, simplified how the services were explained, and trained employees to mention food or car services only when they were useful to the customer. Then she made another mistake. She created too many packages. Oil change with breakfast, car wash with lunch, family wash packages, weekend maintenance packages, coffee discounts for repair customers. Employees had to explain the options repeatedly. Customers took too long deciding. Some chose nothing. One Saturday, Adam listened while an employee spent several minutes explaining combinations to a man who only wanted an oil change. After the customer left, Adam looked at Keela. How many packages do you have? 7. Why? Different customers need different things, and now none of them know what to buy. You told me to combine the services. I didn't tell you to turn breakfast into a math problem. They reduced the offers to 3 simple combinations: routine service, a weekend family option, and a wash and meal package. Everything could still be purchased separately. The simpler offers worked better. A customer who came for an oil change returned with his wife's car. A family that first stopped for breakfast later used the car wash. People from the neighborhood began coming only for coffee or food. Nicole adjusted the menu around what they actually bought. Breakfast became faster on weekdays. Lunch remained simple. If I have to cook 20 things, none of them will be good, she told Keela. Slowly, each part of the business began finding the role it could actually perform. The second month still ended with a loss. It was smaller than the first. Keela had begun checking the numbers often enough to know where the money was going. The repair bays needed more cars. The cafe had strong mornings and weak afternoons. The wash operation depended too heavily on weekends. Keela's first instinct was to work more. Adam stopped her. What time did you leave yesterday? Late. What time? Almost 11. And the day before? Keela said nothing. You're doing it again. Doing what? Trying to replace a bad system with more hours. We just opened. Then build the system now. Adam began visiting more often. not to run the business, but to make Keela explain it. When the cafe was quiet, he asked whether it needed more customers or fewer staff during those hours. When repair bays sat empty, he asked where previous customers had come from and why they had not returned. Keela began understanding that the different parts of the business did not need to make equal money every day. They needed to support the same customer relationship. An inexpensive oil change could bring a family back several times. Someone who bought breakfast every week might later trust the garage when a car problem appeared. Keela also began giving other people real responsibility. One employee handled daily service scheduling. Another took charge of the wash operation. Nicole trained someone to manage the kitchen when she was absent. Jonathan helped evaluate mechanics but stopped trying to spend full days in the service area. By the middle of the third month, the business had its first week that covered all operating costs. The next week was weaker. The week after that was better again. Then Keela began noticing something more important than one profitable week. People were coming back. A customer returned with a second car. Someone who first came for breakfast began stopping for coffee on the way to work. Families discovered they could eat while a car was serviced instead of spending half the day driving between businesses. Employees began recognizing customers before checking their names. Keela kept Jonathan's old rule. If a repair could wait, the customer was told it could wait. If something was urgent, they were shown why. Sometimes that reduced one bill. It also brought the customer back for the next one. The cafe developed customers who never used the garage. Nicole considered that proof she had been right from the beginning. People don't need a broken car to be hungry, she told Jonathan. I never said they did. Then why does that man come every Tuesday? Jonathan looked toward the customer. Maybe his car is very unreliable. By the end of the first year, the business was no longer losing money every month. Some months were stronger than others. Equipment still broke. Repairs still went wrong. A bad week could erase much of a good one. But Adam no longer had to cover ordinary operating expenses. The business had survived long enough for people to choose it twice. Keela's next problem was learning to leave. Even after hiring more employees, she continued checking work someone else had already checked and answering questions her managers could handle without her. The business could operate without Keela for a few hours. She rarely allowed it to. One evening, Adam called and heard noise behind her. Where are you? At work. It's almost 9. I know. What are you doing? Keela looked around. The service bays were closed. The kitchen had finished cleaning. Checking tomorrow. Who manages the morning schedule? Marcus. Is Marcus there? No. Then why are you doing his job? I'm making sure it's right. Did he ask you to? No. Go home. The following week, Adam asked Keela to spend an afternoon at his office reviewing long-term costs. She said the garage was busy. What problem requires you specifically? Adam asked. Keela could not name one. She spent 4 hours away. When she returned, cars had been repaired, customers had eaten, and no one had called her. Over the following months, Adam pushed her toward decisions that did not produce an immediate result. Budgets for the next quarter. Hiring before the business became desperate for workers. Replacing equipment before a breakdown stopped operations. Keela promoted people who could make decisions and then allowed them to make some differently than she would have. Not every decision worked. She corrected what needed correcting without taking all the responsibility back. The first time Keela took Nicole to a medical appointment and left her phone in her bag for nearly 2 hours, she returned to 14 messages. None required her. That evening, she ate dinner with her parents without checking the business once. The second year was less dramatic than the first. That was progress. The business no longer needed a new solution every week. Repairs were scheduled. Parts were tracked. The cafe knew its busiest hours. The wash operation adjusted staffing around weather and weekends. Problems still appeared, but fewer of them threatened the entire business. As demand increased, Keela hired more mechanics and added staff to the cafe so Nicole could step back from daily work. Jonathan still visited the service area, but his role became what his health allowed: experience, diagnosis, and the occasional argument with a younger mechanic who thought a computer could answer every question. Nicole's vision did not return to what it had once been, but regular treatment made her condition safer to manage. The medical fund from the house sale continued paying for her care. The home fund remained too. It grew slowly. The family had more stability, not sudden wealth. There were employees to pay, expenses at home, and months when Keela added very little. She still calculated how many more years it might take before they could afford a place of their own. For the first time, the answer did not make her feel trapped. 2 years after the new business opened, Keela was 27. She no longer worked 3 jobs or spent every hour repairing cars. Mechanics, supervisors, and employees could operate without waiting for her instructions. That gave Keela something she had not had since leaving home at 18 time. One evening, she sat at the kitchen table with a laptop open. Nicole placed a cup beside her. "What are you looking at?" "Classes." Keela was comparing business programs she could take while continuing to work. Some were part-time. Others included evening or online courses. Nicole pulled out the chair beside her. "You're going back to school?" "I'm thinking about it." "You've been thinking about it for almost 9 years, Keela smiled. "Then I've had enough time." Nicole sat beside her and began reading the programs. Keela had once believed college was the path that would allow her to help her family. Instead, helping her family had delayed college for years. Now the life she had built was finally giving her enough room to return to it. Keela enrolled in a part-time business program that allowed her to continue working. At 18, she had imagined college as the beginning of her adult life. At 27, she arrived with nearly 9 years of work behind her. On the first day, the instructor asked everyone to explain why they were studying business. Some students talked about careers they wanted to begin or companies they hoped to build one day. When Keela's turn came, she kept her answer short. "I manage a business now. I want to understand how to do it better." The classes did not make her feel as if she had finally entered the real world. She had already negotiated with suppliers, handled payroll, lost money, hired people, fired people, and watched one bad decision affect an entire week. Some lessons gave names to things Adam had already forced her to learn. Others showed her how much she still did not know. Keela studied after work and on weekends. The schedule was busy, but it was different from the years when she ran between 3 jobs. The hours now had a direction. One evening, she came home and found Jonathan and Nicole waiting at the table. "What happened?" Jonathan pointed toward her laptop. "Your mother says you have a test tomorrow." "I do." "Then why are you standing there?" "Because I just got home." Nicole moved a plate toward her. "Eat, then study." Keela sat down. Years earlier, she had returned to a room where no one knew whether she had eaten. Now her father was telling her to study while her mother complained that she was not eating enough. After dinner, Keela opened her laptop. The home fund continued to grow, but not quickly. The business needed reserves. Her parents still had medical expenses. Tuition took part of what Keela earned. Some months she added nothing. Other months, she transferred whatever remained. The family still lived in the rented apartment. When they looked at houses online, Jonathan checked for a garage first. Nicole checked the kitchen. Keela checked the price and usually closed the page. "We need a garage just for Dad," she said one evening. "Then buy me one," Jonathan answered. Keela looked at him. "I'm trying." The money from the old family house remained protected. The medical fund paid for care without forcing anyone to wait for an emergency. The rest stayed in the home fund, and Keela added to it when she could. They were not ready to buy a house yet. But for the first time, the search no longer felt like a fantasy. Thomas remained in prison, with years left on his sentence. At first, Keela visited only because Nicole asked her to come. Jonathan went too, though he spoke little during the drive. The first visits were uncomfortable. Thomas looked different without the clothes, stories, and excuses he had once used to control every conversation. During one visit, he apologized for the $3,000. "I know I can't give you back the years it took to save it." "No, you can't. I was desperate." "You were gambling," Thomas lowered his eyes. "I know. You put on a fake bandage. You made fake pictures. Then you spent the money 2 days later." "I remember." Keela leaned back. "Good." She did not forgive him because he looked ashamed. She had seen Thomas cry before and heard him promise to change before. The next visit happened months later, then another. Thomas eventually stopped asking what he could say to make the family trust him again. He talked instead about the work he did inside and the classes he was taking. Keela listened without deciding what it meant. Jonathan remained careful. Nicole remained hopeful. Keela stayed somewhere between them. She gave Thomas no money and made no plans for his release. She also stopped refusing every visit. On the drive home after one of them, Nicole asked, "Do you think he's different?" Keela looked through the window. "I think he's scared. Is that bad?" "No." Keela thought about the brother who had once believed someone would always rescue him. Maybe he needed to be. Thomas still had years left on his sentence. For once, no one in the family was trying to shorten the consequence for him. Adam continued visiting the business. Sometimes he reviewed numbers. Sometimes he stopped because he was nearby. Sometimes he arrived at lunchtime and claimed the timing was accidental. No one believed him. Nicole fed him anyway. Keela no longer treated every visit as an inspection. When Adam suggested an expansion she believed was too early, she told him no. He asked her to explain. She did. He disagreed. Keela refused again. 6 months later, the numbers supported her decision. Adam never mentioned that she had been right. Keela did. Often. Their relationship had changed because the test had ended long ago. Adam was still the investor and had decades more experience, but Keela no longer waited for him to tell her what to do. He had taught her to explain a decision, measure what happened, and change it when the result proved her wrong. Eventually, that meant she could disagree with him using the same method. Adam began including Keela in discussions beyond daily operations. He showed her how he evaluated properties, why some profitable opportunities were still bad investments, and how growth could damage a business that expanded before its systems were ready. Keela brought those lessons to class and sometimes brought lessons from class back to Adam. "My professor says," she began one afternoon. Adam groaned. "I liked you better before college. My professor says your way creates unnecessary risk. Your professor has never met my accountant." "That is not a defense," Jonathan heard them from the next table. "Are you two going to argue through lunch?" "He started it," Keela said. Adam looked at Jonathan. "She says that in business meetings too." Jonathan returned to his food. "Then stop starting things," Adam laughed. The business was no longer an opportunity Keela feared losing if she failed another test. It was something they had built together. They still discussed expansion, but neither of them was in a hurry to prove anything by opening a second location. One afternoon, Keela left class and walked past a row of stores on the way to her car. She slowed in front of a clothing shop. Nearly 9 years earlier, when she walked between jobs to save bus fare, she had often stopped outside windows like this one. She would look at something she wanted, check the price, and tell herself she would buy it one day. Then she kept walking. Keela looked through the window now. There was a jacket she liked. She checked the price. She could afford it. Tuition was due soon. The home fund mattered. The jacket was not necessary. Keela almost walked away. Then she went inside. She tried it on and looked at herself in the mirror. It fit. She checked the price once more and bought it. Outside, Keela placed the bag in her car and laughed at herself. It was only a jacket. The home fund still needed years. Assignments were waiting at home. The business would open the next morning, whether she owned something new or not. Before starting the car, Keela looked at the bag on the passenger seat. At 18, she had believed she needed to reach the end of the struggle before she was allowed to buy anything she simply wanted. At 27, she finally understood there might never be a clean line where struggle ended and life began. Keela started the car and drove home. Jonathan never reopened the garage he had lost. The new business gave him something different. He came in several mornings each week, usually claiming he was only there to look around. Within minutes, someone asked for his opinion. A mechanic had a diagnosis that did not make sense. A customer described a noise no one had heard yet. A younger employee wanted to know whether an old part could be repaired. Jonathan no longer spent entire days lifting and bending beneath cars. His body could not do that anymore. Instead, he listened, looked, and asked questions. Keela eventually gave him a title, Senior Technical Advisor. Jonathan studied the printed card. "You made this up. Most titles are made up. What am I advising? Anyone who asks, and if no one asks, drink coffee and bother mom." Jonathan kept the card. Keela later found it in his wallet. One afternoon, she saw him beside a young mechanic, explaining something with his hands while the man listened. For a second, she remembered being a child in the old garage, watching the same hands show her where to place a tool. Jonathan noticed her. "What? Nothing. Then stop staring and go do your job." Keela smiled and walked away. Nicole also stepped back from daily work. Her vision still required regular care, and Keela refused to let the kitchen depend on her being there every day. Nicole trained other people, argued with anyone who changed a recipe without telling her, and still came in whenever she wanted. The cafe never became a large restaurant. The menu remained simple because Nicole insisted that a small number of dishes made well was better than a long menu no one could manage. Some customers discovered the food while waiting for a repair and later returned only to eat. Nicole learned their names. She asked about their children and remembered who had been sick or started a new job. Keela sometimes watched her talking to customers and understood why the cafe worked. Adam's research had identified demand. The numbers had justified the investment. But people returned because the place had become familiar. Nicole's vision did not return to what it had once been. The difference was that treatment was no longer postponed until the family could find money. One afternoon, Keela brought her a report from the latest appointment. "The doctor says you're stable. I told you I was doing better." "Stable means not worse." Nicole took the paper. "For someone my age, not worse is excellent." Keela laughed. She no longer argued. Adam came to dinner on a Sunday evening. He had been invited many times over the previous 2 years and no longer pretended the visits were about business. Nicole had prepared the dish he first ate at the old garage, along with several others because she still did not know how to cook for only 4 people. Jonathan looked at the table. "This is too much food." "You've never complained while eating it," Nicole said. Keela set another plate down. "You two have been having the same argument for years, and your father has been wrong every time," Nicole said. Jonathan looked at Adam. "You see what I live with?" "I learned a long time ago not to get involved." "Smart man," Nicole said. "Coward," Jonathan answered. They began eating. The conversation moved between ordinary things. Keela's classes. A mechanic Jonathan thought was too confident. A customer Nicole believed drank too much coffee. Adam's phone vibrated once in his pocket. He left it there. Across the table, Jonathan reached for a dish and Nicole moved it away because she said he had already eaten too much. Keela laughed. Jonathan protested. Nicole ignored him. Years earlier, one simple meal beside a garage had reminded Adam of the family he no longer had. He had opened an old locket that evening and later invested in a business that promised less profit than many others available to him. Now Nicole placed more food on his plate without asking. "I can serve myself," Adam said. "Then why didn't you?" Jonathan laughed. Keela shook her head. Adam looked around the table. No one was waiting for him to make a decision. No one needed him to solve anything. His phone vibrated again. Adam took it out, put it on silent, and stayed for dinner.